Hello Betta Fish fam, and welcome back to another video. Today I am excited because I'm going to be going over 5 of my top tips, or in other words, 5 things I wish I had known earlier in my betta keeping hobby. Some of these things I don't hear covered a whole lot in your typical 5-tip videos. They usually cover the need for heaters and for filtration, and I'm just going to assume that you know that already, so we won't be covering that. But if you don't know yet, yes, your betta tank does really need a heater and a filtration system. It is a must, so do that. But before I get started, I was just thinking over this video and how I was going to film it today, and I wanted to share this with you. It's maybe a little bit personal, but I think it would help some of you. I am my worst critic. And I think a lot of times that comes with being an artist, or being the oldest, or being a perfectionist. You are your worst critic. A lot of people know what that means, and a lot of people experience it, and I know that in this case with my channel, with filming, with really any of my socials, I always want my videos to look perfect or to be perfect. I would love to have a studio, I would love to have a studio camera, I would love to have my background fuzzed out, and I'd love to have big studio lights, but you know what? I don't have that. And it is okay. I've been starting to think more on it, and in the beginning, and you probably noticed, I have my little betta fish corner that has little William in his tank, and I usually film over there, but sometimes I just like to come outside because I don't need to set up the few lights and some of the things that I have. Sometimes I just love the natural light. And then usually my perfectionist side comes out and says, well, people might not think you're as professional. People might not take you as seriously if you're not in your little room and you don't have a little pretty backlight behind you and you don't have your tank with William behind you. But you know what? I find personally that when I watch and follow other people, other channels, I actually like the people that express themselves more better. I like the people that do things differently better. I just connect with them more. And in your own life, if you ever feel like something has to be perfect, and I'm still working on this, but if people don't like me for being me, and if they don't like that I'm sitting outside to share this information and to just talk and chat, then you know what? They're not my kind of people. So if you ever feel this way, just know that people love you for being you. Your videos don't have to look 100% perfect, and sometimes, yes, I do still need to tell myself this, but I'm slowly coming to the realization that, you know what, you can be yourself and people will love you, and you can still have a wonderful and informative video, you can still have great pictures for your Instagram page, and even just art. If you're an artist, you can still make wonderful art that people will love, even if you see every little imperfection. Without further ado, let's get into the video, because I know you are itching to hear my top 5 tips. If you listened to this whole intro so far, thank you. You're my favorite. And let's just get into the video. First tip on my list is that you cannot just put any fish in with your betta. And you've probably heard of tank mates. Tank mates are just the fish that you add in with your betta if you don't want your betta to live alone, which, by the way, a lot of betta fish will be just fine on their own with maybe a snail in there, some shrimp. That is kind of risky because the bettas I've had always eat shrimp. But anyway, you don't have to have tank mates in with your betta, but if you do want fish to be in there, make sure that it is a slightly larger tank, and don't add just any fish in there. You have to do a little bit of research, and it's not that hard. I actually have a free guide out right now. You can download it in the description that gives you a nice list of compatible tank mates for your betta. But if you ever see a certain one that you want, do some research. Look them up, see if they're compatible. Also, go get onto some online forums and just ask people. See if people have ever added them to their betta's tank and if they've had success, or if it's just turned into one big dumpster fire. Tip number 2, cover your filter intake. And I have never heard anyone else tell you to do this. Sometimes people just take it for granted that it's common knowledge. I learned that the hard way. Essentially, I have a tank that has a built-in filter, so the filter intake is about this big, and it's just in the little back wall separator thing. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. But it sucks the water in, so there is going to be a little bit of a current. And if you have a standard HOB filter, which stands for hang on back, which is just filter, little box sits on the back of your tank, and it has that little central tube that runs down and the water sucks up into there. That is also a water intake. You really want to cover that up with some kind of spongy material, and they do actually sell that kind of stuff, so water can easily get through. But your Betta's fins, and especially Bettas with long fins, which a lot of people have those, and I did too, they will often even just enjoy laying against the filter intake. And what will happen is, even though it is fairly gentle, it's not insanely strong, it will damage your Betta's fins like nothing I have ever seen. It's not like a rip, it's like entire chunks just gone overnight. And just a little bit of a backstory, this happened back in 2020 when I got my Betta fish, Kyler, which he has now passed, but he had gorgeous long blue fins, and he was a half moon, I believe, so his fins were smooth, beautiful. I put him in the tank, and a few months later I started noticing pieces disappearing. It definitely wasn't fin rot, and he was not biting his fins, because his entire caudal fin, which, if you don't know what a caudal fin is, it's the fin in the very back, the one that is the biggest, it was missing. Most of it was gone. And it was about half the size that it was when I got him. So I knew something was wrong, and I started looking at what he was doing, and I found that the little weirdo loved to lay against the filter intake, mainly because I had a slightly strong current at the time. I didn't realize that Bettas need a gentle current in their tank, or little to none. And in order to kind of sit still like he wanted, he would pop himself up next to the filter intake, and it would gently kind of hold him against the wall. And some Bettas love to do that, not just mine. I've seen friends and I've seen other people that have Bettas that love to do that too. And what happens is the intake sucks their little fin up a little bit and it damages it. And I never found the pieces, but I know that's exactly what happened, because once I got some of that spongy material, and you can find it online, I will try to find it myself and I'll link it for you in the description if I find it. Now, you can just avoid this altogether by getting a sponge filter in your tank, which is what I did for my 10-gallon, which I love it. It is a wonderful filter, and I could say more on that, but this video is going to get really long. So let's move on to tip number 3. Tip number 3, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with your Betta's health, more of the health of your live plants in your tank. If you want to have a planted tank, which I highly recommend you do, they're wonderful. It might take you a little time to get used to having live plants and caring for them, but mainly, this tip mainly covers your floating plants. Frog bit, duckweed, giant duckweed, I think that's what it's called. Red root floaters, any of the floaters, and I learned this the hard way. If you want floaters in your aquarium, you are either going to need no lid on your tank, or if your Betta fish is a jumper, you're going to need a tank that is essentially mesh, so it allows a lot of air in and it's not going to hold any moisture at the top. When I first got floating plants, I got a bunch and they were beautiful, and I had a solid lid over my entire tank. So essentially what would happen is the water would evaporate and then it would drip back down onto the leaves of my floating plants. Floating plants do not like wet leaves at all. The bottom can be wet, obviously they're floating on the water, but the tops cannot be wet, or they will slowly decay, rot, and die. And that's what happened to me twice. And then I had a wonderful friend, she is amazing, and I actually reached out to her and she told me what was wrong, and now I can't keep them controlled. They are going crazy and I am getting rid of them by the handfuls every 2 weeks. Tip number 4, don't change the substrate in your tank. Once you have an established and cycled tank, and before you even put fish in an aquarium, make sure it's cycled. You can look into all that. I have some videos on that on some of my socials. But anyway, once you have a cycled tank and you've got the substrate established, there is a colony of bacteria living in your substrate once it is fully cycled. Do not just switch the gravel in your tank, because that will throw it into an entire imbalance, can kill your fish and cause an absolute crash in the cycle, so don't change your substrate. This is why it's important to choose a good one that you're gonna love for a long time, and one that is more natural and that your Betta will agree with, which I always recommend natural tones: brown, white, black even. Those are all great colors, but get something that you're gonna love and then don't switch it out. Whatever you do, don't, because your Betta's life and the life of any other fish or snails or anything in your tank really does depend on this. The last tip, and this is very important, do not always follow the advice of fish and pet stores. Now, sometimes people will have an absolute pro working there, or a manager over a store that really is knowledgeable about fish and fish care and fish tanks. But a lot of the times pet stores, and especially the chain or big box pet stores like Petco and PetSmart, they don't always give the best advice. And not to be mean to them, but some people just don't know. So I do not judge people whatsoever. However, some people take the little pamphlets or the little books as solid knowledge. They don't look it up, they don't ask fellow fish keepers, they don't get online on different forums and ask. They just take that as solid advice and they will follow it. A few examples of that would be to keep your Betta in a small little Betta bowl, or to get certain chemicals that you really don't need, and things like that. So my advice to you would be, if you ever hear something, given that it is from a pet store or from an individual, always ask other fish keepers to make sure that that advice is solid before acting on it, always. And if you haven't joined a community of Betta keepers yet, go to the description and join my free Facebook group. It is called Betta Fish Forum. I will have it linked. Join that group and join other groups. I encourage you, don't just let my group be the only one you are in. Always join other groups, help each other out. That is always the best thing to do for community. Alright y'all, I hope this video helped you. If there are any more tips that you have found to be helpful, put those in the comments so that others can read them. Let's help each other out. If you haven't yet and you are on Instagram, follow me on there because I post fun content. I even post some of my favorite little tips and tricks, as well as little behind the scenes and lots of content on my Betta. I hope you and your Betta have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.